Twilight spilled soft gold over the sprawling Vanderbilt estate on Chicago's western outskirts, its grounds stretching across acres of manicured lawns and mature oak trees that had stood for generations. This annual early autumn charity gala carried far more weight than any prior year celebration. It marked the formal homecoming of Alara Vanderbilt, the family's long-lost biological daughter, torn from them 2 decades prior by a hospital's careless error. 3 tiers of hand-blown crystal chandeliers hung high in the vaulted ballroom ceiling, catching every flicker of candlelight and refracting prisms across rows of silk-covered banquet tables. Magnums of imported French champagne flowed nonstop from polished silver wine spouts, and the room hummed with the low, polished chatter of the Midwest's most elite circle: real estate tycoons, high-fashion founders, national media editors, all dressed in custom couture tailored to their status. Every pair of eyes in the vast space gravitated straight toward Alara. She draped herself in a floor-length silk gown crafted by a Parisian atelier, paired with a limited-edition suite of gemstone jewelry from the family's proprietary fashion line. She leaned gently against Julian and Eleanor's sides, her lashes lowered in a perpetually dejected, vulnerable slant, and every soft-spoken word she uttered wove a vivid portrait of 20 hardscrabble years trapped in poverty. The surrounding guests crowded close to pat her hands and offer sympathetic condolences, showering her with lavish praise for her supposed resilience amid hardship. Off to one side, pressed flat against the floor-to-ceiling bay windows that overlooked the estate's fountain courtyard, stood Lila. No designer fabric clung to her frame, only a cheap cotton sundress ordered from a mass-market online retailer, frayed at the hem from months of frequent wear. She carried a scuffed canvas cross-body bag, slung tight over one shoulder, its fabric faded thin from constant use, and she deliberately kept her gaze fixed on the water feature outside, desperate to draw zero attention to herself. Word had rippled through high society weeks ahead of the event, and every socialite in attendance had arrived ready to watch a dramatic blow-up. The universal assumption was straightforward: the girl who'd stolen Alara's wealthy life for 20 years would throw a screaming fit over stolen fame and fortune, fighting tooth and nail to cling to the Vanderbilt name she'd grown up with. No one could have guessed how willingly Lila had stepped back from every luxury the moment Alara crossed the estate's marble front threshold. 20 years prior, a torrential thunderstorm had battered Mercy General Hospital's maternity ward. Staffing shortages left one overworked night nurse juggling 3 newborn baths at once, and in her exhausted rush, she mixed up 2 unmarked plastic identification wristbands. Eleanor Vanderbilt had delivered her daughter Alara that same rainy afternoon, while Cecilia, a part-time grocery cashier scraping by on minimum wage, gave birth to Lila in the ward's cramped public birthing room. In a single careless misstep, their children's entire lives were swapped, their fates locked onto opposing trajectories for 2 full decades. For 20 years, Lila had known nothing but unbridled comfort within the Vanderbilt compound. A private fine arts tutor visited her 3 times weekly to nurture her innate gift for jewelry sketching. The family covered all expenses for international art study trips, and a reserve block of equity in their fashion division waited for her to claim once she came of age. She'd never once needed to stress over rent, grocery bills, or cheap, broken art supplies. She could lose herself in drafting intricate gemstone designs for hours on end, no financial weight hanging over her shoulders. Alara's reality could not have been more starkly contrasting. She'd spent every day of those same 20 years crammed into a leaky 2-bedroom apartment tucked into the city's industrial outskirts. Her mother's meager hourly wage barely kept the lights on and food on the table, so Alara clocked endless shifts bagging groceries and bussing restaurant tables after school just to chip in for rent. A complete set of drawing pencils was a luxury she could never afford. She scavenged broken, discarded stubs from local art store dumpsters to practice her crude sketches whenever she found spare minutes. 6 months before the gala, a mandatory genetic screening for a hereditary bone disorder running through the Vanderbilt bloodline unearthed the catastrophic hospital mix-up. Julian dropped every ongoing cross-country business deal the second the lab report hit his desk. He mobilized every contact in his network, spent 3 grueling months combing every low-income neighborhood on Chicago's fringes, and finally tracked Alara down to a cramped efficiency apartment where she juggled 3 separate part-time jobs to survive. He brought her home immediately, determined to pour endless wealth and care into making up for the 2 decades of suffering his daughter had endured. From Alara's very first morning inside the mansion's walls, Lila surrendered every privilege without a single word of complaint or resentment. At dawn the next day, she unlocked her walk-in custom closet, an entire room lined with floor-to-ceiling shelving crammed with runway gowns, museum-grade diamond jewelry, and limited-edition leather handbags sourced from every fashion capital on Earth. She called Grace, the head housekeeper, over to catalog and seal every item away in locked storage vaults, keeping only 2 simple sets of casual clothing for daily wear. She volunteered to relocate to a narrow servant's bedroom on the estate's far west wing, a space with minimal natural light and barely a third of the square footage of her original master suite. Twice Julian and Eleanor had offered her life-changing resources: full-ride admission to elite overseas art universities, a standalone designer condo on the city's luxury lakefront, and an annual creative grant with unlimited spending allowance. Each time, Lila had shaken her head and redirected every benefit straight to Alara. On ordinary days around the manor, she took it upon herself to trim the sprawling rose gardens, hand-wash the fine china after family dinners, and tidy guest suites ahead of visitors. She rarely accepted invitations to high-stakes business galas, and when she could not avoid attendance, she lingered at the back of every crowd, never angling for cameras or the head table. No trace of spoiled vanity lingered in her demeanor, despite 20 years of being catered to by a full household staff. Her constant yielding did nothing to soften Alara's simmering, toxic jealousy. The young woman carried a deep-seated inferiority complex forged from decades of poverty, and she loathed every reminder of the gap between her own ragged upbringing and Lila's sheltered, refined youth. All the bitterness and unfairness Alara perceived in their swapped lives curdled into targeted resentment, directed entirely at the girl who'd accidentally occupied her birthright fortune. In front of her parents, Alara maintained a flawless act of gentle, wounded vulnerability. She curled into their sides each evening, recounting every slight and hardship she'd endured out in the working-class world, each story carefully calibrated to tug at Julian and Eleanor's guilt and make them desperate to spoil her rotten. Behind closed doors, though, she wove endless petty schemes to sabotage Lila's budding design career and chip away at every opportunity that came her way. Lila had spent 2 years piecing together an extensive portfolio of hand-drawn jewelry concepts centered around vintage architectural motifs, pulled from Chicago's abandoned industrial warehouses. The collection was her shot at winning the National Young Fashion Designer Gold Award, a prestigious honor guaranteed to launch her professional design career. Hundreds of layered sketch pages filled her desk's locked storage box, and she uploaded every single draft to an encrypted personal cloud drive the second she finished drawing, each file stamped with an unalterable digital timestamp marking the exact hour and date of creation. She messaged Karen nearly every night to hash out creative roadblocks and brainstorm adjustments, preserving a complete, unbroken log of their design brainstorming chats. Alara stumbled across Lila's stack of physical sketches one afternoon while Lila was out working a weekend shift at an off-site art studio. A greedy plan bloomed instantly in her mind. She slipped into Lila's West Wing bedroom while the house sat quiet, pried open the locked desk compartment, and took every single paper draft back to her own room. She tweaked minor color palettes and swapped out a handful of trivial decorative flourishes on each drawing, rebranded the entire line under a new title, and submitted the modified portfolio to the National Design Competition under her own legal name. Months later, the award announcements went public. Local fashion magazines splashed Alara's portrait across front-page spreads, running glowing feature articles, praising the Vanderbilt Blood Heir's unparalleled natural artistic talent. Alara attended every awards banquet, posed for endless photos with brand executives, and accepted every contract offer handed to her, never once acknowledging that the core vision, every foundational gem structure, and all the collection's original inspiration belonged solely to Lila. Lila knew exactly what had happened. Her cloud archives held irrefutable proof of her prior creation, yet she bit her tongue and chose not to confront anyone. She understood how fiercely her parents clung to guilt over Alara's lost childhood, and she had no desire to tear the fragile new family dynamic apart with a public fight. Instead, she set the stolen designs out of her mind entirely and picked up fresh sketch paper to build a brand new collection from the ground up. Her passive mercy only emboldened Alara to strike again, harder this time. A top-tier national luxury brand extended a final round interview invitation to Lila for a lead in-house designer position, her biggest professional break to date, years in the making. The night before her scheduled meeting, Alara snuck into the shared linen closet, took Lila's only professional interview gown, and sliced jagged rips up its floor-length skirt with a pair of craft scissors. She then hid Lila's full physical portfolio deep within a cluttered storage shed out back, buried under stacks of old holiday decor. Lila tore through every room of the mansion the next morning searching for the gown and sketches, but there was no time to source a replacement outfit or recreate her portfolio pages before the interview window closed. She missed the critical career opportunity entirely, all thanks to Alara's calculated sabotage. Even after 2 deliberate, destructive attacks on her livelihood, Lila still said nothing to Julian and Eleanor about Alara's scheming. But Alara had quickly realized how easily she could manipulate her parents' biased sympathies, and she began planting poisonous lies every single night after dinner. She sat with them in the quiet living room, eyes glistening with manufactured tears, spinning fabricated tales. Lila secretly hoarded small antique trinkets from the manor's collection. She constantly isolated and bullied Alara around the house, and she harbored a burning hatred toward the two of them for bringing their real daughter home, plotting to drive Alara away so she could reclaim sole possession of the Vanderbilt wealth. At first, Julian and Eleanor remained cautious, balancing Alara's tearful accusations with their years of observing Lila's quiet, generous character. But day after day, night after night, Alara repeated the same manipulative narrative until their perspective warped completely. The scales of their affection tipped fully toward their biological child. Every new commercial real estate share the corporation issued, every yearly 6-figure trust fund disbursement, every lakefront vacation cottage deed was signed straight over to Alara's name. When Lila asked for a modest small stipend to cover paint, gemstone samples, and sketch paper, Eleanor brushed her off with cold reproach, telling her she'd lived 20 years in unearned luxury and ought to be grateful for what she'd already been given, instead of constantly demanding more. Grace the housekeeper witnessed every unfair exchange and underhanded trick firsthand. She pulled Julian and Eleanor aside on multiple occasions to lay out objective, unfiltered accounts of the girls' actual daily interactions, urging them not to rely solely on Alara's one-sided sob stories. Each time, Eleanor cut her off mid-sentence, convinced Grace favored the girl they'd raised rather than their flesh and blood daughter. Discouraged from interfering further, Grace stepped back from intervening in family conflicts, yet she never stopped recording and archiving every frame of the manor's security camera footage, holding on to an unshakable body of objective evidence for a day it might be needed. Lila stopped asking the family for any financial support whatsoever. Every weekend, she commuted across the city to rent desk space at a community art studio, earning enough hourly pay to cover all her art supplies and basic personal living costs. She settled into a quiet, isolated rhythm within her tiny West Wing bedroom, hoping her consistent avoidance of conflict would finally earn her a measure of peace. That fragile calm shattered entirely when Chicago's citywide major fashion expo rolled around, the event that would become the stage for Alara's unmasked greed and malice. Lila had poured 6 straight months of sleepless nights into developing a brand-new jewelry collection, drawing aesthetic inspiration from abandoned industrial factory warehouses scattered across Illinois. Hundreds of layered hand sketches, resin prototype gem pieces, and styled editorial photos sat saved both on a portable hard drive and locked encrypted cloud storage, double backed up against loss. She messaged Karen almost daily throughout the design process, walking her through creative hurdles and finalizing expo display plans, their full chat history preserved as a paper trail of original creation. If the expo showcase went well, venture capitalist Owen had promised full funding to launch Lila's standalone independent design studio, freeing her forever from needing to lean on the Vanderbilt family's name or resources to build her career. Alara stumbled across Lila's phone conversations about the expo line and instantly recognized how lucrative career-making the collection would be for whoever took credit for it. The Saturday Lila left for her all-day studio shift, Alara slipped into her bedroom once more, broke the desk lock, copied every single design file onto her own laptop, and deleted all original drafts from Lila's physical hard drive. She rebranded the entire series with a different title, tweaked a handful of minor decorative accents, and submitted the stolen portfolio to the Expo's prime central exhibition booth months ahead of the event opening. On opening day of the Expo, Lila rushed downtown with only her cloud-downloaded digital files in hand, ready to set up her display space. She rounded the corner of the main exhibition hall and froze. The massive central display wall belonged to Alara, covered top to bottom with the exact industrial-inspired jewelry designs Lila had spent half a year crafting, with Alara Vanderbilt's name printed large and bold across every informational placard. Lila stepped forward to confront her, calm and straightforward, before a crowd of industry leaders, magazine journalists, and brand representatives had gathered. Alara's reaction was instantaneous, a masterclass in performative heartbreak. Her eyes welled up instantly, her voice cracking with feigned hurt, and she turned to the surrounding crowd to paint herself as a victim. She accused Lila of seething jealousy over her legitimate Vanderbilt heritage, claiming Lila had spent months stealing her original design concepts and had staged this public confrontation at the Expo solely to sabotage her big professional break. Camera shutters fired nonstop as dozens of social media influencers and print reporters captured the scene. Footage of the alleged heir versus imposter drama spread across Chicago's fashion social media feeds in under 2 hours, and public opinion swung violently against Lila without a single person stopping to hear her side of the story. Every collaborative art studio she partnered with cut ties overnight, citing reputational risk. Owen the investor sent a formal email putting the studio funding on indefinite hold. Thousands of anonymous strangers flooded Lila's social media accounts with cruel, accusatory private messages. Overnight, every door in Chicago's professional design community slammed shut for her. Julian and Eleanor raced to the Expo venue the second they received frantic phone calls about the public dispute. They did not pause to ask Lila for her version of events, not even a single clarifying question. They reprimanded her harshly in front of the entire industry crowd, ordering her to issue an immediate public apology to Alara and leave the premises at once. They banned her from all fashion ventures affiliated with the Vanderbilt Corporation indefinitely. That evening back at the mansion, Eleanor pulled a bank card from her purse and set it down on the coffee table, her tone frigid and devoid of warmth. "This holds enough cash to cover a year's small apartment rent," she told Lila flatly. "Find a place in the suburbs to live alone. Stay far away from Alara and us, so we don't keep dealing with these endless, ugly fights." Lila did not reach for the card. She nodded quietly, accepting the demand without argument, and spent that evening packing only a duffel bag's worth of personal belongings to move out of the home she'd known her whole life. As she walked down the mansion's front steps, Grace hurried after her, pressing an encrypted portable hard drive into her palm. "I pulled the full security footage from that Saturday she snuck into your room," Grace explained, her voice low and steady to avoid being overheard. "It captures every second of her prying open your desk and copying your design files. I've made 3 separate backup copies stored off-site, so the footage can never be erased. If you ever need proof to clear your name, I'm ready to hand over everything." Lila thanked Grace sincerely before climbing into a cheap rideshare bound for a tiny, dated studio apartment in a rundown residential neighborhood. Even after everything Alara had done to ruin her professional prospects, a faint flicker of hope lingered in the back of Lila's mind that Alara might feel a twinge of remorse, choose to retract her lies, and return credit for the stolen designs where it belonged. That hope faded fast within days. Alara wasted no time capitalizing on the one-sided public narrative that painted her as the wronged, impoverished blood heiress victimized by a bitter fake daughter. She booked a string of lengthy feature interviews with Martha's top fashion magazine, every segment leaning hard into her tragic backstory of 20 years of deprivation and unfair mistreatment back at the estate. Brand partnership offers poured in nonstop, and she soaked up every award, paid appearance fee, and social media sponsorship without hesitation. Beyond chasing fame, Alara set out to systematically destroy Lila's reputation within Chicago's high society circles. She spread fabricated rumors at every country club luncheon and industry mixer. Lila had secretly sold off Eleanor's rare vintage jewelry collection for quick cash while living at the manor. She'd repeatedly siphoned petty cash from the family's household operating fund, and she regularly badmouthed Alara to wealthy acquaintances, mocking her impoverished background and claiming she was unfit to inherit Vanderbilt's empire. Wealthy socialites and design professionals alike avoided Lila entirely after hearing these falsehoods, refusing to grant her even a minute of their time to explain the truth. Karen, Lila's closest friend, grew furious once she learned the full extent of Alara's lies and sabotage. She urged Lila repeatedly to release the full archive of irrefutable evidence to the public and finally clear her tarnished name. Lila spent several sleepless nights weighing her options, replaying every unfair incident at the manor and the expo in her head before making up her mind to stop surrendering ground indefinitely. She sorted every digital sketch archive, years of chat logs, and Grace's security footage into neatly labeled folders, waiting for the perfect moment to lay every truth bare for the entire city to witness. 2 weeks later, the Vanderbilt annual charity gala rolled out, the exact event Julian planned to use for a landmark corporate announcement. Every major Chicago business leader, fashion brand CEO, and mainstream news outlet had RSVP'd to attend. Julian intended to take the stage mid-evening to formally hand full operational control of the family's entire fashion division over to Alara, her long-awaited career crowning achievement, and the perfect opening for Lila to present her complete body of proof and dismantle every lie Alara had constructed from the ground up. The sprawling outdoor lawn hosting the charity event featured a towering, wall-sized LED screen wired to the mansion's central media system, originally programmed to screen highlight reels of Alara's award-winning stolen designs and footage of her volunteer charity work with at-risk youth. As the gala hit its halfway mark, the crowd's chatter soft and warm amid twinkling string lights strung between oak branches. Julian climbed the short wooden stage, gripping a typed speech outlining the fashion division handoff. At that precise second, every overhead light dimmed to a gentle dim glow, and the pre-planned video feed cut out entirely. In its place, the manor's raw, unedited security footage began to play across the massive screen, visible to every single guest spread across the lawn. The footage bore permanent, unalterable watermarks from the estate's security server, each frame stamped with the exact date, hour, and minute it had been recorded. Viewers watched Alara slip into Lila's West Wing bedroom alone, Jimmy the locked desk drawer open, extract the portable hard drive full of original designs, copy every file to her own device, and delete all local drafts from Lila's desktop hard drive without a shred of hesitation. The screen split vertically next, side-by-side comparisons for all attendees to examine without confusion. On the left panel sat Lila's sequential cloud drafts, each bearing a digital timestamp dating back 6 full months before Alara submitted her original collection to the expo. Every core gemstone silhouette, structural framework, and vintage industrial motif originated in these early sketches. The right side displayed Alara's expo showcase pieces, identical in every fundamental design element. Only trivial ornamental details had been shifted around as a weak attempt to disguise the blatant plagiarism. Next came a scrolling montage of uncut, unedited chat logs pulled straight from Lila and Karen's messaging platform, every message timestamped weeks and months prior to Alara's competition entry date. The full thread documented every brainstorm, creative roadblock, and expo planning session Lila and Karen had worked through together, leaving zero room to argue the concept had belonged to Alara first. The final clip queued up was a high-fidelity audio recording captured during an off-camera coffee meetup between Alara and her college friend, her voice crisp and unobscured as she bragged openly about her scheme. She explained how stealing Lila's designs and playing the wounded victim would turn all public opinion to her side, permanently derail Lila's design career, and guarantee she alone received all the fashion division's power, funding, and brand partnerships from the Vanderbilt Corporation. A collective gasp rippled across the hundreds of assembled guests, and the low hum of casual conversation dissolved entirely into shocked murmurs. Every photographer and news reporter on site lifted their cameras and recording equipment, zeroing in on Alara where she stood frozen beside the stage, her face drained of all color, her body trembling from head to toe. Alara sprinted toward the screen's control panel in a blind panic, desperate to cut the evidence feed before more people absorbed every damning detail. Venue security staff stepped forward calmly to block her path, no physical force used, merely preventing her from damaging the media hardware. She crumpled into loud, theatrical sobs right there on the lawn, screaming that Lila had forged every piece of footage and written fake chat logs solely to frame her out of bitter jealousy. No amount of dramatic crying could counteract the airtight, watermarked chain of evidence playing on the giant screen. Every recording, digital file, and written record existed on multiple independent servers, impossible to fabricate or edit without leaving traceable digital markers. Julian and Eleanor stood rooted at the foot of the stage, their faces ashen, completely stunned by the cold, calculated malice their biological daughter had demonstrated over months of repeated sabotage and slander. Cecilia, Ilara's birth mother, had accepted the family's gala invitation and traveled across the city to attend that evening. She hurried through the crowd to reach her daughter, her expression heavy with profound disappointment. "I raised you to value honest, hard work above everything," she told Ilara quietly, enough for those nearby to overhear. "Even with all this wealth handed to you now, you cannot steal another person's life's work and lie to destroy their reputation. This is nothing short of shameful." Every professional designer and brand executive in attendance rose to their feet one after another, stepping forward to inform Vanderbilt's event coordinators they would be terminating all existing and future business partnerships with Ilara effective immediately, pulling all expo booth reservations and brand ambassador contracts they'd awarded her. Reporters swarmed her position in a tight circle, firing rapid-fire questions about the plagiarism, manufactured victim narrative, and targeted harassment of Lila as camera flashes popped nonstop around them. Julian had no choice but to call the entire gala's formal agenda to an abrupt halt, directing caterers and event staff to guide all attendees to a separate lounge area for refreshments while he, Eleanor, Lila, Ilara, Grace, and Cecilia remained on the empty lawn to hash out the full extent of the conflict in private. Eleanor's voice shook as she confronted Ilara, listing every false accusation the girl had repeated night after night in their living room. All those stories about Lila hiding our antiques, stealing petty cash, plotting to drive you away. None of it was true, was it? Cornered with no more room to twist the truth, Ilara snapped, her voice sharp with unfiltered resentment and rage. Why should I act grateful to her? She got 20 years of the life that was supposed to be mine. I took one collection of drawings. What's the big deal? Mom and Dad should have picked my side from the start, no questions asked. She's just an outsider who needs to step out of my way. That vicious outburst erased the last flicker of parental remorse Julian and Eleanor had held for their daughter's rough childhood. A lifetime of financial hardship might warrant sympathy, but it could never justify premeditated theft of creative property, coordinated industry-wide character assassination, and relentless personal sabotage designed to ruin another person's livelihood on purpose. Julian issued a formal corporate press release before the night ended, suspending Ilara from all decision-making roles within the fashion division indefinitely, revoking all stock shares, vacation home deeds, and annual trust fund disbursements previously gifted to her. A cross-functional internal task force would comb through every incident to draft permanent disciplinary measures, pending full review by the company's board of directors. By sunrise the next morning, online public opinion had flipped 100% in Lila's favor. Social media feeds flooded with apologies from readers and socialites who'd blindly accepted Ilara's manufactured narrative weeks prior. Owen the venture capitalist reached out the very first thing, reinstating the full studio investment budget and offering additional capital to expand Lila's creative team. Multiple high-end fashion brands sent formal partnership proposals, eager to align their labels with her authentic, original artistic vision after the public exposure of Ilara's fraud. Even after losing every brand deal, industry reputation, and her parents' unwavering favor, Ilara felt zero remorse for her string of destructive choices. Every slight, every missed opportunity she'd suffered was blamed squarely on Lila in her mind, and she immediately began plotting a new series of retaliatory schemes designed to drag Lila's career and the Vanderbilt Corporation's public standing down alongside her own ruined name. 1 week following the disastrous charity gala, Ilara launched her first coordinated campaign to sabotage Lila via the company's internal financial oversight systems. She snuck into Julian's home office after hours, rummaged through stacks of archived petty cash receipts from years prior, and handcrafted a fake promissory note bearing a forged signature mimicking Lila's handwriting. She mailed the anonymous tip and fabricated document to Vanderbilt's corporate audit department, filing an unsubstantiated claim that Lila had embezzled hundreds of thousands of corporate dollars during her 20 years living on the estate. The audit team triggered an immediate full financial investigation upon receiving the anonymous accusation. They froze Owen's studio investment transfer mid-process, leaving Lila's startup venture stuck in limbo, and dozens of smaller prospective partners paused all negotiation talks to avoid being tied to a potential embezzlement scandal. Lila cooperated fully with every audit interview and document request without hesitation. Grace supplied decades of continuous manor security footage proving Lila had never once entered the executive financial offices where petty cash was stored, and the corporate finance team pulled every bank transfer, check, and signed receipt from 20 years of household records, none bearing Lila's signature. A third-party forensic handwriting lab completed a formal comparison report, confirming the signature on Alara's fabricated loan document was a deliberate, crude forgery with zero match to Lila's natural penmanship. The audit division published a public clearing statement shared across all corporate communication channels, attaching the full bank records and handwriting analysis as supporting evidence. They filed a complete packet of forged materials with Vanderbilt's in-house legal team to retain as permanent evidence of Alara's false reporting. Her first frame-up a complete failure, Alara wasted no time crafting a second smear tactic. She dug up years-old private text exchanges between Lila and her art studio clients, extracting isolated, out-of-context sentences and splicing them together to fabricate a false narrative that Lila leaked the corporation's unreleased seasonal design blueprints to rival fashion brands for under-the-table cash payments. She packaged the manipulated chat screenshots into anonymous tip emails sent to every major local financial news outlet in Chicago. Several digital publications prioritized clickbait traffic over rigorous fact-checking and ran breaking headlines, claiming a Vanderbilt designer had breached corporate confidentiality. The stock price dipped modestly in response, and competing retail chains reached out to Vanderbilt's sales team to demand steep discounts on upcoming wholesale contracts, leveraging the reputational damage as negotiation leverage. Grace stepped forward once more to coordinate with corporate PR, submitting the full, unredacted, unbroken original chat logs alongside studio surveillance footage capturing every client meeting Lila had attended. The legal team contacted each media outlet that had printed the false story, demanding full retractions and prominent front-page apologies posted to their websites within 24 hours, successfully repairing the brand's damaged public credibility. 2 calculated online smear attempts down, Alara's mental state grew increasingly unhinged and aggressive. She memorized Lila's exact commute schedule and the location of her small rental apartment, showing up every single evening after work to loiter on the sidewalk directly out front. The second Lila stepped out of the building or returned from the art studio, Alara would rush forward to grab her arm and shout wild accusations for passing pedestrians to film on their cell phones, creating disruptive public scenes that derailed Lila's ability to focus on her design work day in and day out. Lila repeatedly tried to reason with her during these confrontations, offering to sit down with a neutral third party to mediate all lingering grievances. Alara refused every overture, and during one particularly vicious run-in, she grabbed a half-finished resin jewelry prototype from Lila's bag and snapped it clean in two. Having exhausted every civil attempt at de-escalation, Lila visited the local police precinct to file an official incident report documenting the repeated public harassment, attaching hours of cell phone video footage she'd captured of each sidewalk altercation. Responding officers met with Alara at the estate the following day to issue a formal verbal public nuisance warning, spelling out fines and potential court-ordered restraining orders if she continued the daily stalking behavior. The verbal police warning, internal corporate disciplinary letters, and widespread public backlash against her unethical behavior did nothing to slow Alara's retaliation spree. Vanderbilt's legal department compiled a comprehensive, airtight evidence dossier covering every offense to date. The surveillance footage of stolen designs, the forged embezzlement paperwork, manipulated chat logs used to spread trade secret rumors, and dozens of hours of street harassment video captured outside Lila's apartment. They explained to Lila that the full body of evidence supported filing a civil lawsuit covering copyright infringement, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil harassment, with legal grounds to demand financial restitution and a court-mandated public apology from Alara. Lila hesitated to jump straight to litigation, still clinging to a faint hope the conflict could be resolved without formal court proceedings. She instructed retained outside counsel to draft a 7-day settlement demand letter and deliver it to Alara via formal courier service. The settlement terms were straightforward and lenient. Within 7 calendar days, Alara would publish a 1,000-word public apology pinned to the top page of Chicago's 3 largest fashion industry digital platforms, permanently delete every defamatory social media post and anonymous forum comment she created, and retract all false audit and trade secret accusations she'd submitted to corporate and media offices. If she complied fully by the deadline, Lila and Vanderbilt's legal team would drop all pending civil claims and forfeit any demand for financial damages. If Alara ignored the ultimatum, legal counsel would immediately file a complete lawsuit with the state district court, attaching every piece of compiled evidence for judicial review. The 7-day deadline ticked down to 0 without a single act of compliance from Alara. Rather than delete her slanderous content or draft an apology, she registered dozens of anonymous burner accounts across career forums, fashion creator message boards, and city lifestyle social groups, posting lengthy, distorted diatribes that omitted every act of theft and sabotage she'd committed. She painted herself as a powerless victim crushed by a wealthy fake heiress and biased corporate executives, stirring up fresh waves of online hostility directed at Lila. With all paths to amicable resolution fully closed, Lila authorized her attorneys to assemble a complete, organized filing packet and submit a formal civil complaint to the local state district court, initiating full litigation against Alara for her years of coordinated harmful conduct. The public civil trial drew standing room crowds inside the county courthouse's largest hearing chamber. Rows of spectator seating filled with Chicago fashion industry professionals, local business leaders, and beat reporters from regional print and digital news outlets. Julian, Eleanor, Grace, Karen, and Cecilia all arrived early to sit through every minute of testimony. Alara attended the hearing alone, declining to hire a defense attorney to represent her interests, and maintain the exact false narrative she'd pushed for months throughout every pretrial mediation attempt. She insisted the jewelry collection designs belonged solely to her, that the embezzlement and trade secret accusations held factual merit, and that her sidewalk confrontations with Lila were justified responses to unfair mistreatment at the Vanderbilt estate, denying all claims of defamation and harassment. The plaintiff's attorney presented each category of evidence in sequential, logical order, walking the judge through every digital recording, written document, and witness statement for careful judicial review. First came the complete archive of time-stamped cloud sketches, manor security surveillance footage, and private audio recording capturing Alara admitting to stealing the portfolio, establishing unambiguous copyright infringement. Next, the decades-long corporate financial archives and forensic handwriting analysis lab results disprove the fabricated embezzlement allegations entirely. Third, the full unredacted client chat logs, platform IP trace records, and formal retraction statements from misled media outlets confirmed Alara had knowingly altered private conversations to spread damaging falsehoods that harmed both Lila's personal reputation and Vanderbilt's corporate brand value. Last, the stack of police incident filings, pedestrian witness written statements, and dozens of video clips captured outside Lila's rental apartment verified months of repeated public stalking and confrontational harassment that disrupted Lila's daily life and professional workflow. After the full evidentiary presentation concluded, the judge turned directly to Alara and asked if she possessed any tangible written, digital, or witness evidence to back up the multitude of serious allegations she'd levied against Laura over the months. Alara could offer nothing beyond repetitive, emotional verbal denials, her own personal testimony riddled with inconsistent timelines and contradictory excuses that crumbled under simple follow-up questions posed by the court. Once she realized every fabricated story could no longer hold up against the mountain of objective proof stacked against her, Alara broke down into loud, tearful sobs in the witness stand, begging the judge to allow a private out-of-court settlement and dismiss the civil lawsuit entirely, promising she would leave Lila undisturbed moving forward. The judge ruled a private informal settlement inappropriate given the full scope of proven, repeated harmful conduct that had inflicted measurable financial and emotional harm on the plaintiff, and proceeded to deliver the court's written first-instance judgment out loud for all present to hear. The core terms of the ruling balanced appropriate compensation without overly punitive, life-ruining financial penalties. First, Ilera was ordered to publish a 1,000-word unredacted public apology pinned to the featured top position of Chicago's 3 dominant fashion digital platforms for a continuous 30-day window, detailing every act of design theft, false financial reporting, manipulated media smears, and sidewalk harassment in full factual detail to repair the reputational harm inflicted on Lila and Vanderbilt Enterprises. Second, Ilera was required to pay a one-time lump sum compensatory damage award totaling $18,000, covering Lila's legal retainers, evidence collection fees, and documented emotional and professional losses, with full payment due within 10 calendar days of the judgment's issuance. Third, a permanent injunctive restraining order was entered into the court record, prohibiting Ilera from posting any negative, untrue content referencing Lila or the Vanderbilt family on any digital platform, as well as barring in-person stalking, confrontation, or harassment in public or private spaces. Any future violation would trigger immediate court enforcement, with additional steep financial penalties assessed. Fourth, all prize money, brand appearance fees, and commercial royalties Ilera had earned off the stolen jewelry line were ordered forfeited and donated to a statewide nonprofit supporting young independent artists, and Ilera was permanently banned from submitting work to all national youth fashion design competitions, with every regional and local creative firm granted the right to review this court record during hiring screenings and decline employment accordingly. The moment the judge finished reading the verdict, Ilera collapsed into quiet, overwhelmed crying at the defense table, yet the written judgment carried binding legal authority with no room for appeal on the core proven facts. Within the 10-day payment window, Ilera scraped together the full $18,000 sum and submitted it to the court clerk's office, before publishing the court-mandated apology post across the 3 major fashion websites, admitting every instance of plagiarism, false reporting, online slander, and offline stalking without omission. Once the apology went live, the last remaining pockets of online public sympathy for Ilera vanished completely. Every local fashion studio, boutique brand, and creative agency added her name to internal hiring blacklists after reviewing the court's public case records. Her former wealthy social circle cut off all contact entirely, and she found herself unwelcome at every upscale restaurant, gallery opening, and industry mixer across the Chicago metro area. Cecilia sat with Ilera for hours following the judgment to implore her to abandon her bitter fixation on Lila and seek stable, modest entry-level work in a non-creative field, yet Ilera refused to accept a quiet, ordinary existence, bouncing between low-wage cashier, warehouse, and janitorial temp jobs to scrape together barely enough rent money each month. Julian and Eleanor spent weeks processing the full weight of their biased, short-sighted decisions over the past months. They scheduled multiple private meetings with Lila to offer large equity blocks and luxury residential properties as a gesture of remorse, each offer politely declined by Lila. She only requested 2 permanent corporate policy adjustments in exchange for dropping any additional financial damage claims tied to Ilera's misconduct, mandatory daily encrypted cloud backup protocols for every designer's creative drafts to prevent future idea theft, and a corporate-wide ban on personal cell phone photography of unreleased proprietary design materials within all studio spaces. Julian signed off on both policy overhauls immediately, tasked the human resources and legal teams with hosting weekly workplace compliance seminars covering copyright law, trade secret protection, and proper conflict mediation protocols to eliminate similar workplace sabotage moving forward. 3 full years separated the chaotic charity gala scandal and the subsequent civil trial from the quiet, stable present Lila had built for herself. Every trace of Ilera's coordinated smear campaign, industry drama, and court litigation had faded from public memory, no longer capable of casting any shadow over Lila's flourishing professional career or peaceful personal routine. Owen's full startup investment cleared the way for Lila's standalone jewelry design studio to open its doors in Chicago's Central Creative Arts District, her signature industrial vintage gem collection flying off retail shelves across dozens of regional boutique partners. She launched brick-and-mortar experience showrooms in 3 major Illinois cities and inked multi-year co-branding contracts with internationally distributed luxury accessory labels, every business milestone earned purely through her original artistic skill rather than the Vanderbilt family's social influence or financial backing. In her spare weekday evenings, Lila hosted free live-stream educational workshops open to all emerging young designers across the country. She walked attendees through step-by-step protocols for preserving dated creative archives, filing copyright protection paperwork, and navigating legal recourse when peers steal original work or spread malicious workplace rumors. She drew directly from her own lengthy, exhausting ordeal as a real-world cautionary tale, urging new creators never to rely solely on mercy or compromise when their livelihoods hang in the balance of another person's dishonesty. Her natural gentle warmth remained unchanged toward hardworking, earnest junior designers on her studio team. She happily sat down one-on-one to walk them through sketching techniques and commercial production logistics, frequently writing internal promotion recommendations for staff members who delivered consistent original work. That kindness had a firm boundary, however. If she uncovered any employee attempting to copy peer concepts or spread false workplace gossip to gain professional advantage, she immediately compiled full archive proof of the misconduct and escalated the issue to HR and corporate legal per the updated Vanderbilt creative protection policies, refusing to offer second chances to those who chose underhanded shortcuts over honest labor. Industry peers and brand executives often pulled Lila aside at gallery openings to ask whether she'd consider the entire months of evidence gathering, court preparation, and public drama a waste of valuable creative time. Lila's response remained steady and thoughtful every time. Unconditional surrender to malicious opportunists only emboldens them to push further past every moral and legal boundary. Defending the months of concentrated creative labor poured into every collection isn't merely about safeguarding my own professional reputation. It's about protecting the fair, ethical creative environment every dedicated designer deserves to operate within. No artist who sacrifices endless nights refining original concepts should ever face theft, public defamation, and career sabotage without pushback via established rules and legal channels. Ilara's life had followed an entirely downward trajectory over those same 3 years. She cycled endlessly through a rotating roster of minimum-wage temporary service jobs, permanently locked out of every white-collar and creative industry position after the permanent cross-industry blacklist spawned by the civil court judgment. Whenever she spotted Lila downtown at a boutique, art gallery, or coffee shop, Ilara would cross the street or duck into a side storefront to avoid any chance of a face-to-face interaction, overwhelmed by crippling shame over the choices that had permanently erased her shot at a legitimate creative career. The fleeting fame and wealth she'd briefly grasped through stolen designs vanished entirely as a consequence of her own jealousy and willingness to manipulate every person around her for personal gain. She lay awake countless weeknights replaying every bad decision from the past 3 years, consumed with regret, yet all court records, corporate blacklist entries, and industry incident logs remained permanently archived with no mechanism for expungement, leaving zero opportunity to erase the permanent damage she'd inflicted on her own future prospects. Internal culture at Vanderbilt Enterprises transformed completely in the aftermath of the conflict. Before launching any new creative project, leadership now cross-references complete cloud creation archives, data design drafts, and documented team communications to confirm the true originating designer, never relying solely on verbal self-reporting from any single staff member. If disputes over creative credit or resource allocation surface within any department, management first reviews objective digital records, surveillance footage, and written correspondence before attempting mediation, eliminating the space for manipulative, one-sided sob stories to sway internal decision-making. Staff members who seek to advance through plagiarism, sabotage, or fabricated accusations are immediately flagged by the new compliance framework and removed from core creative teams with no leniency. Grace retained her head housekeeper role at the Vanderbilt estate, continuing to coordinate weekly HR-led compliance training sessions covering trade secret safeguards and creative copyright standards to stamp out repeat instances of idea theft and workplace character assassination at their source. Minor household squabbles persisted between low-level manor staff, but coordinated plots to steal creative work or fabricate damaging lies about fellow employees vanished entirely from the estate's daily dynamic. Elara still occasionally drove past the Vanderbilt mansion's front gate on slow weekend afternoons, lingering in her beat-up used car to stare at the well-manicured grounds from a distance. Julian and Eleanor spotted her several times and would occasionally leave grocery bags filled with basic food supplies on the sidewalk near her vehicle out of lingering blood-related compassion, yet they declined to offer any financial grants, career referrals, or estate access, having learned the hard way that unearned material support only fed Elara's resentment rather than encouraging accountability. Though the core jealousy toward Lila still lingered deep within her, Elara dared not repeat the harassment and false reporting tactics that landed her in civil court, limiting her bitterness to silent, isolated resentment with no outlet for retaliation against Lila anymore. Lila had never once leaned on the Vanderbilt family's celebrated name to advance her studio or secure brand partnerships over those 3 years. Every retail launch, collaborative line, and industry award was earned purely through the tangible, original artistic skill she'd spent years refining, paired with an unwavering personal code of ethics that refused to compromise integrity for quick shortcuts. She understood clearly that no temporary popularity or windfall profit obtained through deceit, theft, or slander could ever compare to the lasting, unshakable stability built on genuine talent and consistent adherence to moral boundaries. Every creator, every professional across every industry would eventually learn the same harsh truth. There exist no lasting, risk-free shortcuts to success. Any gain won by betraying peers, stealing their labor, or spreading false rumors will always come with steep, lifelong consequences that far outweigh any brief moment of advantage. The only sustainable path to a secure, fulfilling career rests on genuine expertise, uncrossable personal ethics, and the willingness to utilize institutional rules and legal protections to defend one's own hard-earned creative value, standing firm to build an authentic future no person can ever take away.